Welcome and welcome and welcome and welcome to Almost 30 Podcast.
It's so good to have you here. It's Lindsay and Krista, your best friends, your big sisters in times of transition and change. We talk about everything from health and wellness to spirituality, relationships, lifestyle. You know us. Just dynamic duo.
Fashion, beauty.
Please don't, I don't know. Yeah, actually, I'm looking at the framing. The lower half is not on. I don't think the upper half is great, but like we were talking about my ankle socks and what I'm wearing shoe-wise and my jeans.
Is it?
Lord have mercy. No, it's not.
You're a fashion icon.
I'm an icon in my own world. Anyway.
Mom icon.
Here we go. Wink, wink.
Mom. Hey, my claim to fame in fashion was getting best dressed in Ohio. In my high school.
In what year?
Honestly, in 1914.
No, you've had like a fashion revolution.
Yeah.
Fashion rebirth.
Fashion. I've had, it's called Revolve. It's called
a
Working
fashion
with Revolve.
Revolve.
Yes. I was doing the 3 fashion words with my friends. Olivia, she's my special girl. She just gets obsessed with something, and for a month she'll be asking Organic Olivia, she'll be asking everyone, what's your 3 fashion words? And just like, so she was like for a month being like, what's your 3 fashion words? And one of my other friends, Jessie, was like, Revolve about me.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I was like, thank you so much.
True.
It was real. What would you be 3 words to describe your fashion?
You should do this for me. Let's not go off of today.
A sporty.
Today I'm not as sporty anymore, dog. I think it's more like
you're wearing sneakers.
Comfort and sure, but that's more for like comfort.
Androgynous?
I'm done.
Sporty androgynous, sporty spice.
It's okay.
No, you have great style.
It used to be more sporty spice.
I would say fitted or tailored. So there's something about you have nice fits. Your stuff always fits very well.
Okay.
And then I would say elevated.
Okay.
That's nice. Jesus Christ. I would say, would you say like classic minimal? There's something classic and minimal.
Yeah, there's something like like
clean,
minimal about it.
There's a
but
cleanliness.
then every once in a while, there's just something that like I order and I'm like, what the
that you're gonna bust out?
Fuck.
Yeah, there's sleeves that she's bringing in sleeves.
Like watch out for like our press for this book, like that we've already done. Like go back and I'm sure we're recording this before, but I feel like there's gonna be some moments where I just
you're gonna show out.
Off the rails.
We need to prepare then.
I know we need to coordinate
for what our level of showing out is.
Yeah, I think it depends on the venue. Like, is it the Today Show? Is it, I'm manifesting in this moment.
Yeah.
But it's like, in the Today Show, I was like, you can't be showing too much.
No.
That's too much.
No.
You got to be classic, but like colorful.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's very like classic, colorful, fitted. It's like Tibby. It's like Amanda Uprichard and Tibby.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? Like those are the brands.
Matching sets.
I would say mine's trendy.
Sexy.
Jesus Christ.
That's true.
It is true. It's now sexy. And then it's also very of the moment. I like to wear for what I'm going. Like if I'm going to Venice, I'm wearing a hat.
Yeah.
If I'm going to Paris, I'm wearing
Gen Z party.
I'm wearing a long cigarette.
You have a beret.
I literally it's costumes. I would actually say trendy, sexy
going
costumes.
Going to London, need Mary Jane's with a short skirt.
No, honestly, I was wearing Mary Jane's in plaid the whole trip.
Anywho, I'm so excited about this conversation today because we
really
had a
like
blast.
Bridget. Yeah, Bridget's amazing. Bridget actually knows a lot of my friends from college. She grew up in the same hometown as most of my college girlfriends, which is a very special hometown in Cleveland. So we've been in each other's orbits for a really long time. So for her to know the people that I know feels like a very special part of me.
Yes.
And very special to me. And she's been a listener for a long time. So having her on the podcast was so amazing. And she's so knowledgeable. She's such a clear speaker. Having an inspiring conversation about where health stands today from a legal perspective, from an education perspective, and the things that we can really be mindful of in the future to make changes to our health for good is so inspiring.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's a functional dietitian. She's the founder of BeingBrigid, Functional Nutrition. And her work, like, so many of us, like, started with her own story.
Mm-hmm.
She was told by a doctor, in her teens that her nutrition has nothing to do with what she was going through, her condition. And, she just didn't believe it. Like, in that moment, she was like, no, absolutely not. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Something feels off. And she just kind of took that alternative path of, getting well, doing her research, understanding the food is medicine connection. And she's just made it her life's work. And, she's grown so much in her business and her impact. And it's just so cool to see. And she's so knowledgeable. Like, I was watching her speak. I was like,
yeah, she's an amazing speaker.
how do you fit that in your brain?
I know.
Oh my God.
She spoke with your mom group, right?
She spoke to, New Mom on the Block. She did an incredible session on just, postpartum health. I think we can just feel like we're floundering after we have a baby and feeling kind of disconnected from what well actually feels like in that season of life. Like, it's kind of a lower standard. You're like, yeah, I'm alive today. I'm good.
Surviving, not thriving, as they say.
Truly. But she was incredible and so helpful. So I'm really excited for you all to just learn from her and also dig into her work. She has a ton of different programs, but right now she is doing the Being Collective 28-day challenge. So this is really around like reducing your cravings, improving your energy. It's all about like blood, sugar, balancing, which we've talked about on the show, but to have like a support system and resources and meal plans and a coaching container, I think is so supportive to like kick that off for you if it's something that feels overwhelming.
Yeah. So if you guys want to tune into the latest in health and wellness, sort of where we're going as a country, learning more about that and then how we can serve our bodies now. We talked a little bit about the motherhood thing. I'm excited for you to listen. This is it was just so fun. And I was jaw drop.
Yeah.
So much of it.
Yeah.
Because our girl knows some facts.
Yeah. Learned so much.
She worked at the Cleveland Clinic?
Yeah. She was at the Cleveland Clinic with Dr. Mark Hyman.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really incredible. So, yeah, I think you'll love this one. You can go to BeingBrigid.com and the 28-day challenge is there where you can join. We also have the link in our show notes.
BeingBrigid.com. Thank you so much, Bridget. It's BRIGID, BeingBrigid.com. Thanks for coming on Almost 30. Enjoy this one. Share it with a friend to start conversation on these topics to educate one another. It's such a fun way to create and sustain connection among friends. So excited for you guys to connect in that way. And thank you for getting the book. Thank you for being a part of our book process, for making it such a success and something that felt so unique to us and hopefully serves you for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All right. We'll see you on the other side.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
You know what I used to think was healthy hydration? Just drinking more water on top of more water. Like more was the goal, pretty much.
Tell me,
but
I'm
I've
not the
learned
only one who
It's
went
not
down
just
the
about the water.
how
It's
can I
about
support my
the
metabolism
electrolytes.
naturally?
If you're drinking
Just
just
plain old water, especially
all
just
about as natural as
plain old
possible.
filtered water.
I'm moving
After
my body,
I'm eating
minerals
foods,
have been
but I
taken
kept
out.
feeling
We
like
have
my
to
body
replace
was
them.
missing
We
a
have to
key
replace the
piece.
electrolytes.
So
That's where
Pendulum
Metabolic
comes
Daily.
in. I've been taking
I'm obsessed. Have been for years.
about 6
This
months
has
now.
been
It's
just
a
a game
probiotic I
changer for
didn't
me
know
in
that I needed,
pregnancy and
but now
postpartum.
can't imagine not
I
taking.
credit
It's a
being
4-in-1
able
daily
to hydrate
probiotic
myself
that
properly
supports
with being able
digestion,
to
helps
make enough
metabolic
milk
sugars
for my
and
child.
carbs,
It was the main
enhances
component.
GLP-1 production,
But I'm
and
obsessed with their
supports your
new
immune
lemonade
system.
salt
I was
flavor.
like, okay,
Like I think I've
lots
been
of
waiting
big
for this
promises
for a
here,
while.
but
It's
then I looked
so
at the
refreshing.
science,
It's a little
and
tangy,
this isn't
and
just
honestly
wellness
tastes like
marketing. It's
summer in a
formulated
packet.
with live strains,
Whether I'm
like
just starting the day,
Akkermansia.
recovering from a
This is a
workout,
strain that
or
literally
just trying
can't
to
be
make it
obtained
through a
from
long
food, and
afternoon
many
slump,
people don't
just
get
gives
enough
me
of it.
a
So really
real
powerful.
boost.
So
So Element was formulated to
more
replace
stable
energy
sodium,
and the
potassium,
sense
and
of like
magnesium,
balance.
the
The
three
three
electrolytes we use
homeostasis is
most
sourced
through
So
sweat and stress.
grab yours
And
at
doesn't have any of the
pendulumnight.com
sugar
and
or
use the
food
code
dyes or fillers you find in
20% off
typical
your
sports
first
drinks. So
membership order.
it's really the good
Or if
stuff.
you're already
It's just
headed to
become my secret
Amazon,
weapon,
like
to be
most of
honest.
us are, go to
Sometimes,
Amazon.com/pendulum
I'll put a
and
tiny
enter
bit,
code almost
not
30
as
at
much as I would
checkout
put
under
in my
the
own
gift
water,
card
but
or
a tiny
promo
bit in
code
Mav's water,
section
especially if it's a hot
for
day.
20% off your
And
first
he really loves
subscription.
it. And the lemonade flavor, I have to say, is my favorite now. It's iconic. You can add it to a little iced tea. Okay, it's really good. If you haven't tried Element yet, do it for your future hydrated, less brain foggy self, especially if you're feeling tired, crampy, or like your water just isn't cutting it, Element it was one of those things I didn't know I needed until I felt the difference. So try it today. You can go to drinkelement.com/almost30. Right now, Element is offering our listeners a free sample pack with any order. That's 8 single serving packets free with any Element order. This is a great way to try all 8 flavors or share Element with a salty friend. So get yours at drinkelement.com/almost30. That's drinklmnt.com/almost30. This deal is only available through this link. So you must go to drinkelement.com/almost30.
So as being in the space that you're in, like doing what you do, and we're kind of rolling into it, but like, how do you, as a nutrition and health expert, who do you figure out how to trust? Like, these are your peers. Like, so, and what the reason why I'm bringing this up is because for the past couple of years, there's been so much information and data that's come out in every single space as it talks to health and wellness, whether it's diet, whether it's lifestyle, whether it's supplement, like there's just so much information. So how do you, as a person in this space doing what you do, figure out who to trust or who to listen to?
That's a good question. You know, I think that it helps for me because I've worked with so many functional medicine practitioners that I understand like the character, I understand the reasons for why they would say things, or like financial ties that could influence a person's recommendations, or just their own indoctrination, their own inability to see outside of what they were taught in a textbook and not be able to apply it to a clinical space. Like one example would be in 2014, we started the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, which was the first functional medicine hospital in the world. And that was under Dr. Mark Hyman, and I started the nutrition department under him. And we were completely labeled to be this quacky department. We started in the basement of the Cleveland Clinic, and we had 2,000 people on the wait list within a month. And I'm living with my best friend that was in medical school at the time and was with all of these physicians in the other departments, and she'd come home and tell me, oh, we just send all the crazy people to functional medicine because you guys just handle all the crazy people. Even though I would come home with stories about like, this person, we reversed their PCOS today, this person came in and, you know, doesn't have to take their antidepressants, crazy stories that I was, you know, in my early career coming home with, that it didn't matter. It was like, well, this is what I've been indoctrinated to believe, that you know, if you believe outside of this box that we were taught in, then you're crazy. And so I think that you have to always, there's a balance of people who really do follow unbiased science and then apply functional medicine principles. And I think that some people on the spectrum skew so much into follow the science that they lack common sense to say, well, if we're following the science, then why are our health outcomes so deplorable? And then on the other side, the wellness influencers who don't necessarily understand the in-depth level of the science and then make claims because companies are telling them to, or because they saw it on TikTok, that also can be dangerous. And so I think that, you know, looking at a person's credentials, but then not only caring about their credentials, you know, looking at their experience, how many years they've been doing this, what level of clinical experience they have, because I will say that working with more people helps you better understand what works and what doesn't.
Beautiful. Can we start? What is functional medicine? Someone asked me, they're like, I need a functional medicine doctor. I'm like, I don't know what that is. What's integrative nutrition?
You don't know what functional medicine doctor is?
It's a weird thing about me is sometimes I don't know stuff that's like very obvious that I should know. What's a functional medicine doctor? What's an integrative doctor?
Functional and integrative medicine are essentially very, very similar.
Okay.
Functional medicine.
She was just
no, she was straight up shocked.
She was like,
my sister is,
I wasn't
is still
sure if you were trying to pretend like you didn't know.
And you know what? That's the Oprah method. I always say Oprah interview style. She'd be like, you know what? What's functional medicine? And she's like, so what's a psychic? I'm being dead serious. I don't know what it is.
Okay, so functional medicine, the entire field is all about getting to the root cause. So instead of going to a doctor and then being given a prescription for the condition in a 15-minute appointment, the goal is to start to ask more questions to be able to get to the root cause. Is your anxiety fueled by stressors in your life? Is it because you have an imbalance in your microbiome that's impacting your neurotransmitter production? Is it because you're, consuming too much alcohol? Getting more of the history of your life as far as like, were you vaginal or C-section? Were you given a lot of antibiotics at birth? Could this have, contributed then to more ear infections that led to more antibiotics, that then led to acid reflux, that then led to a proton pump inhibitor, that then led to more health issues that led you to 5 different prescriptions, and no one really acknowledging why any of that started to begin with. So functional medicine really digs deeper into the root cause of why something is happening.
Wow. And then integrative is what?
Integrative is essentially the same thing.
Okay.
It's just branded a little bit differently.
Huh, interesting. Okay.
And I guess like how did you, because like you said before, like people can kind of choose one path, whether it's more like of a traditional Western medicine path. Like I guess what brought you to functional medicine, or sorry, functional nutrition, rather than a more like, quote, traditional approach?
Right. So all dietitians go through the same undergraduate training and typically graduate training in your dietetic internship. And that was the case for me. I went through a more traditional training, and then I went into the field because in 2005, I was diagnosed with a neurological autoimmune disease, and I was having about 30 mini seizures per day that I reversed through my food and lifestyle intervention, and my parents taking me to a functional medicine doctor. And the neurologist that we saw completely dismissed, no, nutrition has nothing to do with this. And at the time, no one really knew what functional medicine was. So my parents were like, well, we believe that we should at least start with the foundations of it, seeing if does she have nutrient deficiencies? Can we improve her diet before jumping to a new pharmaceutical on the market? So that's what we did. And then after being dismissed so many times by our neurologist and then seeing the impacts of my own life, I said to my mom, there has to be a million other people that are like me that are going to their doctor because they have a disease that's either driven by or exacerbated by their food and lifestyle, that are being dismissed, that are being handed a prescription, that are being told there's nothing that you can do, this will only get worse as you age, and I want to help those people. And so I chose to become a dietitian, not realizing that traditional dietetics training is very different than functional nutrition. So I love
It's like food pyramid based.
Food pyramid. Now they call it My Plate. Yes, that's the
Love that rebrand.
exactly. It is a rebrand.
My Plate. You have 11 servings of pasta.
6 to 11.
6 to 11
A day?
Yes, that's the thing. This is 6 to 11 servings. Yes.
No. Okay.
It is. So it's been updated to be decreased a little bit, but for about 20 years, the National Nutrition Guidelines were recommending 6 to 11 servings of grains per day, and telling people about half of them should be whole grains. So essentially the government has been recommending 50% refined grains in a person's diet, 3 to 6 servings per day, with a slice of bread being an example of 1 serving, pasta. Yeah, those, it is true.
How massive I would be if I was having 11 servings. That is so
but then you wonder why 74% of the population is overweight or obese.
Yes,
But are people following?
Wait, it's 74% now?
74% are overweight or obese, yes.
But I guess
So the dietary guidelines for Americans state that about 60% of people are following the recommendations. So if the recommendations were actually working, then 74% wouldn't be overweight or obese, unless the way that they're collecting the data isn't as accurate as they believe. There's a lot of
Gray area.
Wow.
Yeah, so I went in thinking that I would be using food as medicine. I did my high school senior project on food as medicine because I was like, I want to help as many people reverse their condition or improve it. So even if it means that they need medication, can they decrease the dose? Just using a food as medicine, food first approach should really be how healthcare is operated. It would drastically reduce our rising rates of healthcare costs that went from $3.8 trillion in 2019 to $4.8 trillion in 2023, a $1 trillion increase in a 4-year period of time, because the way that our conventional medicine system works is just handing out prescriptions, and when anyone has any disease, without asking, what are you eating? What is going into your body? And then we have the food industry that's fueling, this entire epidemic, and most doctors that are gaslighting their patients saying, oh no, nutrition has nothing to do with that, or giving very generic nutrition recommendations instead of being specific about nutrition and supplements and things that people can do before they jump to these pharmaceutical interventions. And unfortunately, the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry and the healthcare industry are profiting like crazy, and it's at the expense of our population health. So when I started realizing all of this, because my mom will even recall, my parents are the reason that I do what I do. And I would have conversations with my mom, like, Mom, it's not actually evidence-based for me to have removed gluten from my diet. And I don't think like that it necessarily is important unless you have celiac disease, because that's what they teach you when you're, going through traditional nutrition training. And she'd be like, this is weird because it worked really well for you. What do you mean? Why are you questioning everything that we started to do? Or she, even recalled recently, you came home and were like, Mom, eating organic isn't evidence-based. And so even though I had the experience of these things that my parents did that helped me so much, once I started going through, they create this level of indoctrination that's like, no, this isn't evidence-based, so you can't recommend it. And so I continued to, kind of be led astray a little, but
Sorry,
then
and you're
because
being
of
led astray in school.
led astray in school from what I believed to be true nutrition.
Yes,
that
as a training
I
as a
learned
dietitian.
from my parents.
Training as a dietitian school.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I just want to make sure it wasn't like high school or something. Yeah.
Or in my master's program, where at the time there was a huge story that had come out about heavy metals in apple juice and in rice. That was like 2014,
rice,
and so I did my a project on it. And the head of our department, my recommendations were ways that you can decrease the heavy metals by doubling the water, for instance, so that you remove some of the water after you've boiled the rice. And she afterwards said, no, Bridget, that isn't what you would recommend. You would recommend that you would recommend telling people that our food system is safe and they don't need to worry.
No way.
What?
Because it creates more fear when you tell people these types of things.
The way that I'm hyped up for this talk right now.
Where is that coming from? So is she learning?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Who's she being paid by?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What is that connection, I guess, from your perspective and being in this world for
It's
as
also
long as you
super
have?
patronizing to be like, they're gonna be scared. Like everyone's so stupid.
Well, that's the whole thing about food dyes right now, is that the experts that are coming out saying, oh, no, you don't need to worry about food dyes, are saying that it's fear-mongering to talk about the role of food dyes in increases in neurobehavioral issues like inattention and hyperactivity in kids. That has been very well documented in the research. If you look at the research, the largest review that came out of California in 2021, team of MDs, PhDs, they looked at 27 clinical trials that had been conducted, and they came out saying this is unequivocally food dyes are impacting neurobehavioral outcomes in kids. There is an association. Some kids are impacted more than others, but at minimum, we need to make strides to decrease it in our food supply. That was in 2021 and has gone largely unaddressed. So then experts are coming out on the opposite end saying, oh, it's fear-mongering to talk about this. We just need to trust that the United States food supply is the safest that we have. And so, I look at my own training and the ties to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics with processed food companies, and then, the medical school education and the ties to the pharmaceutical industry. And it's very similar, where you're learning important things like the science, hopefully some of it is unbiased, and core biochemistry and physiology and those types of things. But at the same time, you have to be able to have your own level of discernment to be able to say, how can I be a better practitioner to impact people in the most profound way possible? And really that comes back to the basics of eating whole, real foods that are unprocessed, that are as often organic as possible given a person's budget, and changing the way that our food system is set up so that we're not adding so many food subsidies to corn and wheat and soy in our ultra-processed foods, because really today our ultra-processed foods are hyper palatable, but also extremely inexpensive compared to whole, real, organic, regenerative farm foods because of our food subsidies. So then, other people will say, oh, it's racist or unfair to talk about the need for whole, real, organic foods. And really the conversation should be, how can we increase access to everyone by changing the way that our food subsidies work, so that the government is actually helping people that are minorities who are more prone to these health outcomes, these poor health outcomes, chronic diseases that we're seeing in both adults and kids.
I'm hyped.
Yeah.
I'm hyped.
So can you just kind of explain to people, I guess, the very subtle and sometimes not so subtle corruption in the education piece of it? Because I think people
kind of assume that everything is kind of working separately. So when you said that your professor, said like, we tell them that everything's fine and it's totally fine and healthy and just not to stress them out, I guess, what are the influences? Is it big food? Like, what do you know now being out of school and doing your own research? Like, who's influencing who and what? Like, what is the web?
Big food, big pharma, and healthcare are very much, I would say, probably the core of it. And I believe that some people feel that they're doing the right thing. Like that's how deep the indoctrination is. It's not like there's all these people that are walking around with corrupt minds being like, how can we make more money at the expense of people's health? I think that there are probably at the top a lot of people that have that mindset that are able to funnel it in a way to the people that work for them to spin it in a way that you're bought into the brand, whether it's the FDA or it's the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics or it's Kellogg's or General Mills or whatever company. Like people believe that they're doing good work, and that's where, or even the doctors that are, just peddling out prescriptions that think that, oh, I'm doing such important work, which of course prescriptions are amazing and so necessary in so many different realms. But if you've been a doctor for 30 years, you've seen a drastic change in people's health outcomes when it comes to who you were treating 30 years ago and what the health status of our children and adults looks like today. And so I think that teachers will even say this, like you don't even have to be a health professional. You just have to have common sense and be able to see patterns in people, where teachers will say, kids 30 years ago did not have the same issues neurobehaviorally and neurologically when it comes to depression, when it comes to autism, when it comes to ADHD. Like there's so many kids that can't learn today, and this was not the case 30 years ago. Something is happening. And so I think that we get so drilled down to the science and what the evidence shows. And unfortunately, the United States has a safe until proven guilty model, whereas other countries have a guilty until proven safe model as far as what's included in their food, and then also limits that they set for specific nutrients, or I don't know if you'd consider them nutrients, but things like trans fats, added sugar, where for years and years this went on without being responsibly enforced by people like the FDA. So it's hard to say specifically like who is responsible. I think that we live in a for-profit society that tries to profit as much as possible, and it's at the expense of people's health because it's more about their bottom line than it is about making choices that are in the best interest of people's health. And there are a plethora of examples of that. Like one example would be just in 1965, the Sugar Research Foundation, they funded a study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine that paid Harvard researchers to place the blame for coronary heart disease on dietary fat and cholesterol, and then steer it away from sugar, decrease the concern that there was around sugar. So that was in 1965. And that then steered generations of research towards dietary fat and cholesterol. It changed the food industry, increasing sugar. And it wasn't until 2015 to 2020 that the government finally made an added sugar limit, saying we would recommend no more than 10% of daily calories be consumed by added sugar. That didn't happen until 2015. And so you go from 1965, that happening, to then 2015, with added sugar being the largest driver of chronic disease, type 2 diabetes, coronary heart disease, cancer, the leading causes of death and disability in the United States. And there's been no regulation or oversight because of these lobbyists that are lobbying against things like adding the added sugar line to the nutrition facts label. That didn't happen until 2016. So even though there was research coming out showing the risks and the harms of added sugar in the 2000s, because of what happened with the corruption that happened in the 60s, and then the FDA kind of like turning a blind eye, we had decades and decades of people eating way too much added sugar, having no idea how much they were even consuming because there was no line on the nutrition facts label. When they presented the idea, there were petitions in 1999 to add an actual line on the nutrition facts label. they didn't until 2016. So it took almost 20 years for that to happen, where people had no idea how much added sugar they were even consuming. So not only were they steering the attention away from sugar, but then they also weren't giving people the transparency. And the reason is because there's so much lobbying that goes into these choices and these decisions that slows the entire process down, because the food companies don't want transparency. They don't want you to have the added sugar line. They don't want you to be able to see all of the things on the front of package, which is why it's taken so long for them to finally officially declare front of package SKUs that will then tell people like if it's too high in added sugar on the front of package. But these have been things that have been petitioned for decades that have taken a long time to actually be rolled out. Trans fat is another great example where trans fats, it was known, 2008 was when California banned trans fats. It wasn't until 2015 that the government removed it from the generally recognized as safe list, 2018 that they removed it from the food supply, and then they gave companies an extra 3 years to remove it from their products as like a grace period to help to decrease the burden for them. So it wasn't until 2021 that trans fats were actually banned from the United States food supply. But they knew in the 90s that trans fats were increasing risk of coronary heart disease, and only 2 grams per day. So you didn't even need to have a lot of trans fats in the diet in order for that to actually happen. And all these companies were Burger King, McDonald's, they were frying everything in partially hydrogenated oils that are trans fats. And this even happened after there was a ban on partially hydrogenated oils. They ended up being taken to court because they were hiding the trans fats, the partially hydrogenated oils, in the mid-2000s with in their fryers. So I think that people don't realize, unless they really look at the history, like how much food companies really choose their own profits over people's health, even when it's glaringly obvious, like something like trans fats. You only need to eat 2 grams a day. And what they did is on the nutrition facts label, if there was less than 0.5 grams, you could round down. So they'd put a partially hydrogenated oil in the ingredient list, but on the front of package, they could claim 0 grams of trans fat. So let's say it was 0.4 grams of partially hydrogenated oils. On the front of package, 0 grams of trans fats could be stated. So a person's buying it, thinking that they're not getting any. They don't know to read the ingredient list because there's not the education that there was today. You only need 4 servings of that particular food to get close to 2 grams. That increases your risk of coronary heart disease. So not only were they not removing it from the food supply, but they weren't adding the level of transparency that people actually needed. And then they were essentially allowing companies to lie, saying 0 grams of trans fats when there is trans fats in the food. It's a lie. And that went on, and it continues to go on today with things like food dyes. Like food dyes are a big topic right now. And specifically, red dye number 3 was shown in the 80s in animal studies to cause cancer. The FDA in 1990 said red dye number 3 has been shown to cause cancer in animals, which was why they banned it from cosmetics. You can't add red 3 to blush, to lipstick, to any cosmetic product or anything that goes onto the skin, but they allow it in your food that you're ingesting. So they've been petitioned over and over again by health organizations to say you need to ban red dye number 3 in food like you did for cosmetics. Under the Delaney Clause, it's actually illegal for you to say that something is not allowed in our supply because it's carcinogenic in skin, but then to also at the same time say that it's safe in food, because it's then very hypocritical.
Yeah. What's the Delaney Clause?
The Delaney Clause is essentially like a law that guides companies with what they're doing. So this most recently came up when the Center for Science and the Public Interest petitioned the FDA in 2022 saying, you have to remove it from our food. It's in more than 2,000 products, especially products that are marketed to kids. Yeah. When you look at like gingerbread houses and some of the peppermint candies, all of the Halloween candy corns. I mean,
thought
not
it was
all of
crushed
them.
ladybugs.
Crushed ladybugs?
What's that?
You never heard that in Ohio?
No.
You guys just I'm just pissing because the way that you're just saying the smartest thing ever. I'm like, I thought red was crushed ladybugs. In Ohio, they said that M&Ms were red because they were crushed ladybugs.
Oh.
You never heard that?
I never heard it.
Dude,
It's kind of dark.
it is dark, but we were like, yeah. We were like, die, little ladybugs. Yeah, we were like, that's crazy. But maybe that was
must be
the
a
lie
Cincinnati thing.
by big food to try and make us think it's not red food dye, but it's ladybugs.
Yeah, wow.
Must have been.
Continue.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
On the Delaney. Okay, the food dyes.
So it's in 2,000 plus products, a lot of them that are marketed to kids, and it just continues to be allowed. So in 2022, CSPI petitioned the FDA saying you need to remove this from being allowed in food, specifically red dye number 3, because you've already deemed it to be a carcinogen. And it's been decades that we've been petitioning you and you continue to ignore it. So they've ignored it and not responded for the last 2 years. And they just officially had stated this past week, I saw in a Senate hearing, that the commissioner of the FDA that oversees food had said that they're working towards addressing a petition that was made on red dye number 3 and that we should know more in coming weeks.
So why do they want it in there? Is it the cheapest option? Do they want to kill us? Like,
Yeah, that's a
what
good question.
is like the reason? Because to your point, it's just so like it's shown to be incredibly harmful, causes cancer, etc. So why?
So here's my perspective. I think that it's probably because they have so many food lobbyists that have so much power. And if they're making changes, they have to have an abundance of evidence to show it. Otherwise, it will probably lead to lawsuits from these lobbying groups. So for instance, the National Confectioners Association, they represent $37 billion in retail sales. So they have a lot of power. They represent the companies that are producing the high sugar products, the farmers, the manufacturers, like everyone across the spectrum, to make sure that people have jobs and then that these companies are profiting. So the companies have ties with their congressmen and women. They have ties with all of these places that make it very challenging for regulations to be put into place when it comes to our food. And I think it's because of the power that they have that makes it difficult for the FDA to make choices that are in the best interest of the people rather than the corporations.
Yeah.
So when I was in 2014, I got my master's in public health nutrition before I went into functional medicine because I was interested in, it's essentially like studying how you can improve population health with nutrition. And so everyone that was in my program ended up going to different government agencies. And I didn't want to go to a government agency because I understood that they were getting funding from so many food companies. So I went to the Center for Science and the Public Interest, which is this it's a health organization that keeps petitioning the FDA on all these things. And when I was there,
the FDA is like, God, won't they shut the fuck up?
oh, I'm sure.
I bet they're just like, God, them again. Like another thing from them.
I'm sure they accept no money from nutrition companies. They're funded through their Nutrition Action newsletter that they have so many subscribers for and donations. And then they have a whole legal department they sue companies for making false claims. They petition the FDA. So that was a lot of the work that I was doing when I was there, was like collecting the data. And I was like sitting in grocery stores, just taking pictures on my iPad of the front and back of labels. Because at the time, the internet didn't list the ingredient list and the nutrition facts panel on the actual products. So that was my job when, I was there.
Wow.
But I was at the NIH for a meeting in 2014 prior to the release of the dietary guidelines in 2015. So every 5 years, the dietary guidelines are released and there are national nutrition recommendations. And then they determine who gets money essentially from programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, and the Women, Infants, and Children Program, the School Lunch and Breakfast Program. So if companies are meeting these nutrition recommendations, then they can receive money, and essentially like $8.5 billion of what used to be called food stamps goes to soda companies, because people can still purchase soda using SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance. So there's lobbying, there's people that are trying to implement bills saying if you're using taxpayer dollars, then you cannot buy soda.
Yes.
Because this is a nutrition program. But there's these lobbying groups believe that SNAP dollars should be able to be used however a person wants, and that it's unfair to tell a person that they can't use their dollars in the way that other people can use dollars. So they are against things like regulation around the SNAP program when it comes to the bills that have been proposed. So the dietary guidelines, they set the tone for the national nutrition agenda every 5 years with the committee that's appointed with the quote unquote nutrition experts of the country. So I was at the NIH for a dietary advisory committee meeting where the committee was there, and then they had about 70 people in the room that were presenting, they were giving public oral testimony on the food or beverage that they were there to represent. So they had the American Beverage Association, they had someone there from the National Confectioners Association, which used to be called the American Candy Association, the Sugar Association, the National Association of Margarine Manufacturers, the Corn Refiners Association, McDonald's Inc., the Dannon Company, the American Meat Institute Foundation, and then they had one dietitian and one doctor of all of the people that gave those public oral testimonies that were there advocating for more plant-based guidelines. And so that was really the moment when I was there that I was like, wow, the food industry is setting the agenda for our national nutrition recommendations that are causing us to get sicker, fatter, more depressed, more infertile, dying younger.
So this was that was the crew that was setting the dietary guidelines. All those people you mentioned.
That was the crew that was presenting to the nutrition committee to say, this is why you need to consider our food when you're making the guidelines.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So it's like, it's deep.
Yeah.
It's
Who's
deep.
the judge? Who's the person that's like yes or no?
Well, now RFK.
Oh, wow, cool. So he would be the person that they would present to.
No, so it's because he's the head. The people that they present to change every 5 years.
Okay.
And they have a new committee that they appoint. The conflict of interest within the committee runs deep. So it's about 90% of people that are on the committee that have been shown to have conflicts of interest accepting money from processed food companies and to other big companies, drug companies too, like Eli Lilly and other companies. So when they set the nutrition agenda, it's also hard to know like how, if their own bias is impacting what they're going for.
Can you imagine McDonald's just be like, hey guys, here to talk about the dietary guidelines for Americans. He's like, have you seen the playpen? Have you seen the ball pit?
Wait, but that is what is happening. Like if you had a camera in these meetings, that is what's happening. Like the person from it was either the Sugar Association or the
margarine person?
Yeah.
margarine person.
That's crazy.
The fact that they have a seat at the table as margarine is crazy.
You're not actual food.
Yeah.
But they said sugar should be eaten in moderation because it provides joy and people are stressed and they need something to look forward to in their life. That's what the representative talked about. So I left that meeting being like, whoa, I think my mom is really right about a lot of this.
Yeah.
Like is what I'm learning real?
Yeah.
Because this is what you're up against when you're trying to make changes. And then you're a mom and you're trying to advocate for like no food dyes and you're up against the $37 billion sugar National Confectioners Association. It's like, no, it's fine to add more sugar to these foods. No, it's fine. The kids need it in moderation. It provides more joy.
Wow, it provides more joy. That is, I mean, that would be a fascinating documentary to see all of their cases and their like, because none of it could be on nutrition. It would all have to be on emotion. Because processed food is a lot linked to soothing and emotion and addiction, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and I think too, like that was 2014 when I was there, and a lot more research has come out showing the role that ultra processed foods and high sugar diets play in fueling depression and anxiety. So it'd be interesting to see like what the representative from the National Confectioners Association is presenting to the Dietary Guidelines Committee this year.
Yeah.
Like, is it the same? Or
that should be public.
Yeah,
That should be public.
agree.
We watched the Johnny Depp trial. For some reason, that was public. Something like that should be public.
Yeah, I agree with that.
For people to see.
Agreed.
Like, what we should have a say and understanding of what is going on for the dietary guidelines. That's how our taxpayer dollars are spent.
So you can add the actual proposal for the dietary guidelines that then people can respond to online to give their comments. And then they review the comments and then they formally publish the actual nutrition guidelines. I just don't know how much of it is actually listened to. Because in 2014, when I was there and I was working for the Center for Science and the Public Interest, they were going at the FDA and the Department of Health and Human Services saying, like, this needs to be added, this needs to be added. So a huge win was like adding the added sugar line on the nutrition facts label, because that was something they were advocating for so hard. And added sugar in food was even higher at that time than it is today. So because of a change like that, it made a really big difference. But that the Center for Science and the Public Interest is one of the largest organizations doing that work. There's not a lot of you don't get money. And if the food industries and the drug industries aren't funding you, then how are you getting the money to be able to hire the lawyers, to be able to do the due diligence? And really that's the job of the FDA. But unfortunately, there's such deep ties. And I know, like, even Vani Hari, Food Babe, gets so much criticism for not being a dietitian or not being a health expert or having an MD or a PhD behind her name. And it's like, she's doing more for the good of the American public than every single public health official that's working for the organization. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, she's actually holding people accountable and is advocating for changes when it's very clearly documented, and nothing is being done, likely because of corporate ties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess, in those recent, what would you call them, hearings, or like just with Kellogg's and like her whole movement, I guess, why is it making a little bit of like mainstream news now, do you think? Like, I guess, what is that like open window? Mm-hmm. Is it because like the potential of that changing administration now? It's for sure, but I'm always so curious when things hit mainstream, like why it's happening. From your perspective, what do you think?
I think that it was because of them doing the Senate hearing. Yeah. The Senator Ron Johnson, I believe is his name, that had hosted the Senate roundtable in September, where he had RFK and Courtney, mm-hmm. Max Lugavere,
yeah. Jordan Peterson.
And all of them, Casey Means, Callie Means.
Right. Yeah.
And that was when Vani Hari brought it up, the food dyes, saying, why is it that our own American companies aren't giving us the safer version that they're giving to every other country? Because it's not even like they have to reformulate. The formulation exists in every other company, in every other country, that are coloring their food with watermelon, with blueberry coloring from actual food versus synthetic dyes that are derived from petroleum and coal tar, which is what they're feeding in the United States. And so that she and Jason Karp had brought up in the Senate hearing. And I think that was really what spurred it, because she said in the Senate hearing, I'm going to Kellogg's to bring this to your attention, to bring petitions. She said that in the Senate hearing. And so that was really what started it. And they had written a letter to Kellogg's earlier that year, and Kellogg's had essentially said that they would only sit down with them with their lobbying group to debate on the science of the safety of food dyes, because they said that they're following all the federal recommendations and that they're in compliance with all federal safety guidelines for our food, and so they'd like to debate the science. And that was what spurred her then bringing it to the Senate roundtable. And then she got a lot of momentum. I went to the rally in Battle Creek, Michigan, where she had 1,000 people there, 400,000 signatures. The crazy thing is that Kellogg's completely ignored the petition. They didn't address it. They wouldn't let them in the building, her and Jason. And it's interesting because, like, when she petitioned Kraft years ago and had, way less signatures, they met with her. And she was like, just meet with me and talk to me without your lobbying group, to talk to me about, like, why you won't change this. And it was a very weird situation where they had a security guard outside the building, 1,000 people there that were, peacefully protesting and waiting for them to be let into the building and to deliver the petitions, the 400,000 petitions. The security guard was like, I'll take your petitions, but that's really like all that we're able to do. And then there was a Kellogg's executive that held up a sign on a whiteboard in the window that said, "Get off our lawn." And that was what really sent her over the edge. So it's interesting, as a Kellogg CEO, to be that arrogant that you don't even have a meeting with someone when they have 400,000 petitions, and you think that you just can continue to, like, the worst marketing strategy in the entire world is to just completely ignore that this is happening, especially because moms, I think moms more than anything see the impact in their kids. They see that when they're eating red 40, yellow 5, yellow 6 at birthday parties, that if they're not eating it at their own house, they see the impact that it's having with the hyperactivity, with some kids having more of more of a reaction than others. And so what we've done since then is reached out to politicians in Ohio to say, if we're using taxpayer dollars to pay for these foods in schools, at the very minimum, you should add a standard where there are no food dyes that will be served to kids when we're using Ohio taxpayer dollars for the school lunch and breakfast program. So, that was just recently passed in California, where California is banning those food dyes. And unfortunately, this is happening on a state level when the FDA should be the ones that are implementing these changes. And, I think that there's just a lot of these companies are large and they're powerful. And unfortunately, there's no recourse. It's like, you see Pepsi buy Siete Foods. And for as much as that was like, oh, amazing, Siete like grinded it out and totally deserves that. But like Pepsi buying Siete Foods, it's so unfortunate. It's like, okay, so as Pepsi, your strategy is going to be going from basically driving our chronic disease epidemic for the last however many decades, and then pivoting when you find it to be convenient for consumers to care about their health, to continue making money without having to pay any financial price or to be in jail. Like, really, it's criminal what has happened, especially with the soda industry, that there should be more accountability and there's not. So these companies now can just pivot because they find it to be, convenient, and they have more evidence that they can be profitable with companies that care about people's health. Like, I was invited to Nestle a number of years ago. They had a bunch of dietitians invited, and I almost didn't go because I was like, why would I go? But I was like, oh, I'll just hear out what they have to say. So they're presenting to these dietitians like all the changes that they're making, the reduction in sodium. And I was the only person there that was like, don't you think it's weird that reducing sodium in your Stouffer's mac and cheese is something that you consider to be a great nutrition achievement when it's an ultra-processed food and that no one's getting healthier from that? And I did ask that question, maybe not in as direct of a way, but in a very direct way that, made everyone uncomfortable. And they're like, well, we'd love to live in this world so that we could just serve vegetables to people, but unfortunately, that's not what people are going to buy. So if we chose to serve healthier foods, they would just sit on the shelves and then go bad. And so they make these assumptions about their consumers where it's like, but it actually just comes down to like you thinking that you can continue to get away with the same playbook that you've been using for decades. And like, the game is up. Too many people understand now the role that food plays in their overall health, either driving our chronic disease epidemic and increasing our healthcare costs by $1 trillion in the last 4 years because the food industry is just, largely unregulated. And they also understand in many cases that changing their diet and eating more whole, real, anti-inflammatory foods can change their entire trajectory of their health, not only for them, but also for their kids. Like, we have double the rates of ADHD in kids, double the rates of depression. We have 41% of kids that are overweight or obese. And as moms, it's apparent something is wrong. Something is not right. And what you have been doing in our food supply is not going to be okay to continue because we aren't going to buy your products.
Okay, tell me I'm not the only one who went down the how can I support my metabolism naturally rabbit hole. I'm all about as natural as possible. I'm moving my body, I'm eating whole foods, but I kept feeling like my body was missing a key piece. So enter Pendulum's Metabolic Daily. I've been taking it for about 6 months now. It's a probiotic I didn't know that I needed, but now can't imagine not taking. It's a 4-in-1 daily probiotic that supports digestion, helps metabolize sugars and carbs, enhances GLP-1 production, and supports your immune system. I was like, okay, lots of big promises here, but then I looked at the science, and this isn't just wellness marketing. It's formulated with live strains like Akkermansia. This is a strain that literally can't be obtained from food, and many people don't get enough of it. So really powerful. I've noticed better digestion, more stable energy, and this sense of like balance in my body, like a homeostasis of sorts. So grab yours at pendulumknife.com and use the code almost30 for 20% off your first membership order. Or if you're already headed to Amazon, like most of us are, go to amazon.com/pendulum and enter code almost30 at checkout under the gift card or promo code section for 20% off your first subscription.
That's that mom ferocity.
Yeah.
That mother ferocity
And
that
I think-
only comes with motherhood.
And I truly think that, like, from what I'm seeing, especially with these big food companies and just kind of the, whether it's the Senate hearing or the peaceful protests, like, moms are driving this. I saw Kelly LeVeque the other day. She was speaking at her son's school, interviewing someone about sugar. Whether it's like bringing in cupcakes and snacks and cookies and what they're offering, school lunches. And I really think as much as we want the FDA, et cetera, to change, and hopefully they will in the long run, but I think we need to be, just the people, but like I do think moms are going to be kind of at the forefront, the boots on the ground, like really pushing this change, even if it's like a school by school level or, just kind of on the local level, because I don't know if we should just depend on it changing at that high level eventually.
I'm so down with that.
100%.
And I'm just, why is it moms have to do everything?
Yeah.
Why aren't the
So
men
true.
fucking pissed about this? Why is a man of a company putting a whiteboard, get off my lawn in the window, and that's okay? Why is it that the women have to fight for their kids to be healthy? They're already doing everything emotionally, everything spiritually, taking care of everything. And now they have to be the ones that are fighting the fight to have their kids be well. Like, where are the men in this? It's actually crazy to me that men do not care what their kids are eating. They don't care what their kids are doing. They don't care what their kids are consuming. And I love men. I'm not a man hater. But what is it that the women have to take so much of this responsibility? It's actually crazy. Why do you think that is? Why is that? Why are no men?
I think that's a generalization of all men, but yes, I
true.
think it's like
for the women that that's
No,
a
but
good point.
it's
That's a good
true.
point.
Like at the protest, it was predominantly women that were there. There were not a lot of, there were some men, but there were not a lot of men that were there. It was mainly moms, and then a lot of them brought their kids. So I agree. I mean, my husband cares so much about the foods that our
Right.
kids are eating. So 100% it is a generalization, but I think that it's the moms that are the ones fighting. Like, it's the moms that are going to the schools that are like, you can't serve this in our school. Like,
Yes.
I mean,
I
I would
agree.
think that would probably be more likely. But yeah, when you just said that, I was like,
But where's
damn,
the
that's
masculine
so
frame
true.
protecting the family? This is my whole thing. Like, I just am like, so if you're the masculine and you are the provider and protector, why are you not protecting the family? Why is the mother in that role of doing literally everything? Now also being in the protector, like a lot of moms are providers. They're making half the money, they're making some sort of income, and now they actually have to go outside and like protect their children because the men don't take it seriously or like don't think it's valid or like think it's like some sort of thing. What is that?
No, it's true. I think that probably a better way of saying it is that it's like on the parents, because I do think that there's, like Johnny has a lot of friends that like listen to Andrew Huberman and are, like all about the quality
your
of foods
husband?
that Johnny's my husband.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That they're serving to their kids. So I think that it's on the parents really to do the advocacy work, to have the conversations with their friends, to have the conversations with the schools, because as parents, like, we are always having these conversations with people that we're friends with people who want to hear it or not.
Right.
And I think some people are afraid to speak up. So it really comes down to having to do the work to, whether it's the mom or the dad. And you make a very good point that it is like, why is it always on the moms to do so much? But I think that the job should be on the parents to go to the schools, to have the events about the role of sugar, to talk about like serving nothing with food dyes, to talk to their friends about having birthday parties without the food dyes, like those kinds of things, so that you're not put in a situation where you're like, do I let my kid eat the cake and be normal and like everyone else? Or do I like risk creating an eating disorder and not letting them? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's a good thing to be like to my kids. It's like, hey, we're not normal. Like, we're just to acknowledge and accept that we're not normal. Because like, what is normal?
Yeah, what is normal?
Depressed,
I think
overweight,
That is
anxious, you know, all of these things, and I'm saying that with love, not like I'm wanting everyone to feel that way, but it's like normal is not a place that I think many people want to be. Like we all want to feel good and vital and happy and healthy. So, but I mean, it would be so hard. I can't imagine, you know, what it would be like to be a parent and kind of go against that. And the energy that a parent needs to kind of have consistent with kids. Like, okay, this birthday party. Okay, we got to talk about this thing. And then this, you know what I mean? We got to check this label. It's like a lot.
I think there's also like a awareness of like the parent shaming that like,
Yeah, that's
you
a good
know,
one.
I mean, I want to be talking about this fucking all the time. I want to talk about this to all my parent friends, but there are certain parents that I'm like, you know, I don't know if I want to die on this hill with them.
For sure.
You know, and just like basically shame them.
Yeah.
It's not even just shaming them, but it's also like the opposite happens where they kind of shame you.
Yes.
And that even happens like within my
All the
own
time.
family where it's like,
All the
you
time.
aren't evidence-based because this is safe. And it's like, okay, we'll just agree to disagree.
Wow.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's like.
You have so much data. I don't know how you would do that. I would be like, listen up. Pull up
Yeah.
a chair.
Really.
I'm going to talk to you about this. I'm going to talk to you about a time in 2014.
That's how it is. It's hard. So you're right. For as much as it is like have the courage to say it to everyone,
Yeah.
there are people that you don't want to die on the hill because
sure.
it's such a drain on energy to have to be doing it at all times,
Yes.
even with people that are receptive to it, that you do have to figure out like where you can get the most bang for the energy spent.
Yeah. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
For people that are listening, like, I guess we just talked a lot about the system and sort of what's happening in this place, which is, I mean, I am jazzed and amped. So if we're talking about someone specifically getting bang for their buck nutritionally, what are some ways and things they can do to really just maximize their wellness and their well-being? Like, what are some practices that you recommend, some food, some like nutrition levers that you pull?
Yeah, I think that the first is from a mindset standpoint, really fully embracing the idea that food is our most powerful form of medicine. And I think people sometimes believe like, yeah, it's important for us to eat healthy. And also I would say like I've worked with thousands of people on every level, like moms, teachers, podcasters, best-selling authors, congressmen, like CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. It like runs the gamut. And I would say that most people that have the most success really are bought in because there's so many opportunities for you to in your head downplay like, oh, maybe this isn't actually as important. Like maybe we shouldn't care about buying organic. Maybe it's fine to do this and to have the glass of wine every night because I'm generally eating healthy. And so I think that creating your own standard for what you feel is truly improving your health, because food, just after working with thousands and thousands of people, I would say that the dramatic effect that can take place in transforming a person's body on a cellular level, but then you see it physically when it comes to reversing every disease that has been stated to be not reversible by conventional medicine exists. And so I always think like if it's possible for one person, it's possible for any person. And you have to really have that belief to consistently make those changes. And because it's all about how you're eating most of the time and not the minority of the time, right? Like that 5 to 10% isn't what you want to focus on. You want to focus on the 90% that is going to move the needle with your health. And I think so many people really are not able to be consistent with a total lifestyle change because they're in this perfectionist mentality of like on the diet, off the diet, on the diet, off the diet, on the organic, off of it, you know, where it's easy to shift. And so it comes down to really like what you're doing 90% of the time and then being able to get right back on track anytime that you get off track. That makes, it sounds so simple, but it makes the most profound impact on people who are able to like 10 years later continue with these habits versus people who are then struggling 10 years later. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that would be the start. From an actual nutrition standpoint, engaging in phytonutrient consumption, I believe, is one of the most important things that people can do because of the way that phytonutrients. You know, there's tens of thousands of phytonutrients in our food. And this is one of the downsides of taking like a turmeric supplement, for instance, and not eating the raw form. Is not that I'm against turmeric supplements, but that you're only then getting like one specific element, or a better example would be like a vitamin C supplement, where you're only then getting vitamin C. And the benefits that come from a food that's high in vitamin C is not just the vitamin C, it's the abundance, the thousands of phytochemicals that are in the food, many of which have yet to be discovered. Like, we haven't even discovered all of the phytochemicals that exist that in 10 to 20 years from now will be sold as different supplements that you can get from just eating the whole food right now before the science is even clear to understand like what those phytonutrients are.
And phytonutrients are what?
Phytonutrients are plant-based chemicals. So they essentially drive the color changes that happen between a red, a green, and a yellow bell pepper. Each of those phytonutrients has different phytochemicals that are driving that pigment change, that are the protector of the plant from any kind of outside stressor, that do the same essentially internally once you consume it. So I would say that the more that you eat foods that can stain your cutting board, the deeper the phytonutrient content likely is. So when that comes to like turmeric, beets, foods that when you eat them, you can see the staining effects are going to have a profound impact on you internally when you actually consume them. From an anti-inflammatory standpoint and a signaling standpoint, like knowing that food is sending signals, it's information that's impacting your cellular function and changing your epigenetics. So not only is this important for you, but also for your offspring because of those epigenetic changes that can happen from the foods that you're eating, where you pass on different gene expression to your offspring when you're consuming the right foods that have these abundance of phytonutrients. So I would say that that is an enormous place. Also, when it comes to blood sugar regulation, probably the largest missed thing is a person's overall color consumption. The easiest way to say it, eating the rainbow and how many colors you're getting, because what's happening for a lot of people that are on these like, you know, protein shake, low carb diets is that they're missing a lot of the phytochemicals and the phytonutrients, which are essentially the same thing, phytochemicals and phytonutrients, that not only change our cellular function and our epigenetics, but they also change our microbiome. So they modulate our gut microbiome by feeding specific strains of bacteria and increasing our production of short chain fatty acids. Short chain fatty acids are one of the most important aspects of our overall metabolic health. So you could be following a low carb diet, but not getting a wide array of phytonutrients, and you're not actually giving your microbiome enough of these signals to produce the short chain fatty acids that then impact your overall metabolic health. So you could be eating a low carb diet, and then every time that you eat a carb, see a blood sugar spike when it comes to, you know, if you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor, where you're like, why am I spiking to quinoa, into lentils and things that, you know, there is an individual response that maybe you just are genetically that you're genetically set up to spike for certain particular foods. This is going to happen to every person. But you'll spike more when you have poor metabolic health. So it comes down to setting the foundation for eating these phytonutrients that increase your short chain fatty acid production, that help to regulate your overall blood sugar response and how you're responding to any form of carbohydrates, where you have higher insulin sensitivity, which is essentially, you know, metabolic flexibility as well, to be able to know what to do with the carbohydrates so that your body can break it down. Your pancreas can secrete the insulin that it needs. The insulin can efficiently can unlock the cell so that the glucose can get into the cell so that your blood sugar isn't spiking and it's not driving more of that inflammatory response that happens as a result of increases in blood sugar.
So phytonutrients and mindset.
Phytonutrients, mindset. I would say also dietary fiber. And this is one of the things that happens with an ultra-processed food diet. You know, some of the downsides of an ultra-processed food diet, since ultra-processed foods are the leading cause of death and disability, chronic diseases that are the leading cause of death and disability in the United States, officially surpassing cigarettes as far as the impact that they have on our overall health in a negative way. And 80% of the foods that are sold in the grocery store are ultra-processed foods. 67% of a child's diet is made up of ultra-processed foods. 60% of the adult in America's diet is made up of ultra-processed foods. So the question could be, is it because you're consuming a diet that is filled with these synthetic food dyes, with pesticides, with preservatives, with these refined grains, with added sugars? Or is it because these foods are replacing things like the phytonutrients, the fiber, the protein that our bodies actually need to thrive? So I don't really see it as us needing to have an answer to that, because really the answer is just to decrease ultra processed foods so that you can increase the consumption of these whole unrefined foods. But I would say that as far as that's concerned, fiber becomes harder to get when you're not eating enough carbohydrates sometimes, if you're on a super low carbohydrate diet, and also if you're, eating too many processed foods. So dietary fiber is one of those nutrients that Americans are falling drastically short of, that slows down the blood sugar response to any food that you're consuming. That is really important also from a short chain fatty acid, the same thing with phytonutrients, where it impacts short chain fatty acid production and butyrate production, which is a short chain fatty acid that impacts our overall metabolic health, which then, anything that impacts your overall metabolic health is going to also lead to a more efficient metabolism. It's going to decrease levels of chronic inflammation and decrease your risk of nearly every single chronic disease. And not just chronic disease, but I would also say, because a lot of people focus on chronic disease as the largest problem, and it is, because 60% of our adult population has at least one chronic disease, which is insane. And
Crazy.
At the same time, in people that we work with that have autoimmune diseases, gastrointestinal diseases, depression, anxiety, these are conditions that are more likely impacting the quality of a person's health and not necessarily shortening their lifespan like chronic disease. And so I think that when we are talking about nutrition and overall health, that we need to not only factor in like living longer and decreasing our risk of chronic diseases that shorten our lifespan, but also decreasing our risk of diseases that impact our quality of life. Because most people I think that it's more generally recognized that type 2 diabetes is reversible through nutrition. Of course, some doctors would argue that, but it's becoming more accepted that truly is a thing that you're able to reverse. Whereas something like an autoimmune disease or gastrointestinal symptoms, or like even just IBS or inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, there's more opposition as far as how much you can actually impact from a nutrition standpoint, where you'd meet maybe with your endocrinologist or your gastroenterologist and be told like, no, nutrition has nothing to do with this. We had a client that had Crohn's disease for 20 years, and they have the means to see the top gastroenterologists in every hospital across America. And they went to every single one of them. And she was injecting herself with the steroids that she needed for her Crohn's disease to manage it. And they asked every single one, does nutrition have anything to do with this? Should we try removing gluten or dairy from her diet? The answer was no from every single top gastroenterologist. And then she started working with us. And within 30 days, her symptoms that she's had for 20 years started to go away, from basic anti-inflammatory principles and understanding like food sensitivities that were driving some of her symptoms. So I think that it comes down to also understanding that food plays a role in other diseases and symptoms outside of just the chronic disease landscape, for people to really have that level of empowerment and agency over their health, to know that even if they're being told by their doctor that this has nothing to do with it, knowing that most doctors get 0 hours of nutrition education in medical school. And so they might not necessarily be the person that you want to be asking about that. Even though they're an expert in disease and pharmaceutical interventions for that disease, like disease treatments, they aren't getting exposed to any form of nutrition education. So most people go to their doctor for those kinds of questions, but it's really not the person that you should be asking, especially when you look at most doctors. And I'm not trying to be judgmental when I say this, but most doctors are not the picture of health. They're not practicing the lifestyle habits that we're practicing and really like taking ownership of their health. And unfortunately, they're caught in a model that doesn't really allow for that to happen, because they're, 30 patients a day are shoved down their throat, and they have 20 minutes with each person. And not only do they not have enough time with that person, but they don't have enough time to just like pee and eat lunch and meal prep for themselves. So it's, I think that it's just important for people to think outside of the box of this traditional model where it's just my doctor that I'm going to go to for these questions. It's like you have to expand your healthcare team. And this is something that even like
to your favorite wellness influencer.
To your favorite wellness influencer.
To the girl you love on Instagram. Expand your team.
But I think that's what people are doing.
Oh, I know that's what they're doing, because they're trying to find out. It's like, we can't trust them. And then, our hope and intention is for people to find the power within themselves, to either just find their center, find their core, question things, figure out what works for them, figure out what feels true for them, and not outsource so much of their power or so much of their intuition as it relates to food.
100%. To any expert. We say that to every client that goes through our programs. Like, you know your body better than anyone. So we're going to tell you like what our nutrition recommendations are based on research and then on the experience that we have in working with other people. But it might not, you need to tell us, you know, what works for you. And you need to be able to discern that for yourself. And so much of that comes into, you know, like reflection and intuition. And unfortunately, people are just not really living in their bodies, as you educate on so much and talk about and bring attention to, that you have to live in your body and pay attention to your symptoms in order to even understand. Like, most people don't understand that their migraines are connected to the foods that they're eating, because they don't even they're not even thinking, like, when they get the migraine, what foods did I eat today that I might not have last week?
Right.
How much coffee did I have today? Like, what kind of air am I exposed to today that I wasn't exposed to? How much blue light have I been exposed to? Like, we're unfortunately not taught these things, and it's not necessarily second nature for people if they're not brought up in a home of parents who are teaching them how to do this.
Yeah.
So it's really on them, unless they're listening to your podcast and like learning how to do that for themselves. It's not necessarily something that people are ever taught to do.
Conscious awareness. We're here about expanding consciousness and helping people find and be in their power. And I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I feel so inspired and excited. And just like, it's so great to have women like you doing what you do. Like, it's just, you're so knowledgeable, so clear. There's so much that you're fighting for that's going to impact generations to come. And I just feel really lucky that we're on the precipice of a lot of change, you know, in the administration and just in general with things that are moving towards a better life and a better experience for all of us. And I think my hope is that we're going to have and receive the change that we've been hoping for. So I'm so grateful to have you. Where can people connect with you? Where can they get more information about you?
So on Instagram, I'm Being Brigid. That's BRIGID, like rigid with a B. And that's also my website, BeingBrigid.com. And we run the 28-day challenge through the Being Collective that I'd love to welcome your audience to. That's 28 days of anti-inflammatory meal plans with group coaching and a course that walks you through the science of using food as medicine. So an open invitation that you can find at thebeingcollective.co.
That's amazing. So we'll have that in our show notes, and then we'll also make sure to share that online, because I think a lot of the women in our community are like, what is the next step? Like, you get so excited about this information and it's like, where do I go? What do I do? And I think we're always about empowering ourselves first, you know, kind of getting the power back in. And I love that they have the opportunity to work with you.
And having the accountability is so key.
Yeah, the coaching piece is huge.
I feel like, you know, with anything, just really having that expert and then also the community to kind of lean on, and the container, that like 6-week period or 4-week period, you said?
4 week.
So 28 days. Lights a fire.
I love it.
People, I think, need more accountability than they realize.
Then
most
information.
people
need
think they eat
accountability
healthier than they do.
100%. I mean, even myself, dude. Sometimes when I'm like,
let's join.
It's all brown today. I know, literally.
I know. I'm like, where's the color today
Yeah.
for us? This has been phenomenal.
The
Thank
best.
you for
I can't
having
wait
me.
to have you back.
Yeah.
I love you guys. We'll see you on the next one.
Later.
Bye. Thanks, Bridget. We love you.
We love you. You can go to beingbrigid.com, BRIGID. And again, they have the Being Collective 28-day challenge going on right now. You can join right now. And this is all about balancing your blood sugar and just feeling really supportive with meal plans and one-on-one coaching, et cetera. Or actually meal plans, coaching, and more. And thank you so much for everyone who has bought our book. Y'all, you've made this just such an incredible experience hearing from you as you've just gone through the book and revisited it. Has been amazing. And we appreciate you. If you haven't gotten the book, you can go to almost30.com/book, and it makes a great gift. I need a campaign about like all the people in your life turning 30, even though this is for anyone moving through change, but this is a perfect gift
Yeah, when
for
people
someone.
give me books, it's so meaningful.
So meaningful.
I've even had some people give me books where they've written in them. It's kind of was their book that they had, and then they gifted it to me to kind of move through it. And you feel their energy, you feel their moment. So yeah, definitely a great gift.
All right, y'all. We love you.
We love you.
See you on the next one. Bye.